Okay, so our next task is going to be to create a member service which we can use to make the HTTP requests to go and get the data from our API server. So we'll do this in the Angular command line interface just as we have been previously. And I'm just going to say nggs for service, and we'll put this in our _services folder. We'll call it members, and we know this gives us a test file, so I'm just going to say skip tests and press return. And this has now created that service. So let's go and open this service, and I'll just use a keyboard shortcut to do this. And look for member service.ts. And inside here, we're going to be making HTTP requests. So we're going to need to inject the HTTP client. So I'm going to say private HTTP equals inject, and then the HTTP client. And we're going to need our base URL address. So I'm going to say base URL equals, and it's high time that we started doing this the proper way, which is not to hard code these URLs inside our services, and instead we use a configuration file just like we do in .NET and just like we do just about everywhere really. But the Angular team decided one day that nobody uses environment configuration in an Angular app, and we used to have this environments folder inside our project, and one day they removed it, and the next day thousands of developers were complaining about the fact that they removed it. So the next day after that, the Angular team created a configuration so that we can create, using the Angular CLI, the files and folder that they took away. So if we take a look at ngg-help, then what we have inside here nowadays is the ability to create the environment files for a project. In their efforts to clean things up, they gave us a bit more work to do to get the thing back that they took away. In their efforts to clean things up inside the default Angular template when we create a new project. But we can get this back quite easily. So I'm going to say ngg, and then we need to say environment, pluralized, because it's environments. And I'll press return, and this goes ahead and creates two files. And it also updates our angular.json. So let's go and take a look at the angular.json just to double check what this is going to do for us. And inside here, where we've got the update to this file, this blue stuff on the left hand side, this is what has been updated by the Angular CLI. We've got this file replacements, and we've got replace environment.ts with environment.development.ts, but when we're running in development mode. So the default is the environment.ts, but when we're in development, then specifically we use this version of the file. So let's go and add some configuration inside this environments folder, and we have two files, the development and the environment.ts. And inside the environment.development, then we'll add a couple of properties inside here. We'll specify production and set that to false. This is our development environment. And we'll also specify the API URL and add a colon, and in quotes we're going to say https:// localhost 5001 /API/. And don't forget to add that / because that's how we've defined it so far in our services and where we've used this. And I'm just going to copy these two elements, and I'm going to go to the environment.ts and just paste them inside here, but production we're going to set to true, and the API URL we're going to take out the local host address and just leave it as just API/. When it comes to publishing, I'll explain what we're using this for a bit later, but for now this will suffice for our configuration. So we can go ahead and use this in our members service. So instead of the hard-coded URL, we can just say environment, and we need to make sure we get this from the right one, and in fact it's difficult to see there which one I'm going to select, because we want to get it from the environment.ts. Otherwise we'll have a problem when we do publish our application. So I'm going to have to guess which one this is because there's no way I can see this. I'll go for that one. And that's the one we want. We need the one that's from environment. Please don't select the one that says environment.development. Otherwise, it'll work fine for now, but later on you're going to have an issue when it comes to publishing into production. So we're going to select the API URL from there. Now, since we're here, let's just go and update our account service because I know we've used that in there, or at least the hard-coded URL. So let's remove that and we'll set it to environment. And I think it was the second one. Nope, it switched. So I'll undo that and then I'll use the quick fix, and the quick fix gives us the full path. Okay, so I'll add it from environment and not the development one, because we've seen the configuration. We know that this gets switched to development when we use it, and I'm going to set this to the API URL. And there's one other place that we've used localhost, that's in our test errors component, and let's just update this as well and do the same thing, and we'll use environments, and that time I guessed correctly, and the API URL. Okay, so back to our members service. And we don't need the constructor inside here because we're using the function version of the injection. And we're going to create some methods in here to get the members. So we're going to have get members, and this is going to return list.http and get, and we've got a type now, so I'm going to say member, and this is going to be for our members list, so it's going to be member array. And then the URL is going to be list.baseURL plus users. And then we need to think about authentication, but I'll come back to that in a moment because our endpoints now are requiring authentication. Because if I double check my user's controller where this request is going to go to, then at the top of this file I have the authorize attribute. We're going to have to send up our token with these requests, and we'll come on to that soon. And the next request we'll add is going to be the get member, which is going to take a username of type string, and we're going to return list.http.get, and we're going to be getting a member, and we'll say list.baseURL plus, and we'll say users / plus username. And again, we need to think about authentication. So we're storing our token inside our service, so we can get our token from our account service. So I'm going to say underneath the HTTP, I'm going to say private account service equals inject, and we'll get hold of our account service. And then we'll create a method because we need to provide some HTTP options to our HTTP get method. And if we take a look at the options, then we pass in the URL, and then we've got the options, and we can pass headers to or with our request. So that's what we'll do. But we'll create this inside a separate method just for convenience, really. So I'm going to say get HTTP options, and I'm going to return an object, and this is going to have headers, and we're going to say new HTTP headers that we get from Angular Common HTTP, and then we'll open up parentheses, then curly brackets, and we're going to specify authorization. And inside here, no type safety it seems with this. We're allowed to make typos in here, and our compiler's not going to tell us anything. But this does need to be accurate, because if your header is spelt wrong, or even if you use the UK version of spelling authorization, that's not going to work. It has to be like this exactly. So if you get an unauthorized response, then obviously please do come back here and check what you're doing. And we're going to use a template literal to specify the bearer and token. And we specify a template literal with backticks. So we'll say bearer, and backticks is important, by the way. Please don't use quotes, otherwise you'll have different functionality, as backticks are important here. So I'm going to say bearer, and then a space, and then $, and then curly brackets and say list.accountservice.current-user.token. And the token could be null, so that's fine. The optional chaining there is okay. So I've used backticks specifically here for a reason. We can just use quotes and concatenate this value onto Libera, but this highlights the fact that we've remembered to put the space in between bearer and token. I've seen far too many questions in the Q&A where this is the situation. And it's a bit more obvious that we've got a space there if we used a template literal rather than string concatenation. So then we can use these inside our getMembers method. So I'm going to say list.getHTTPOptions, and I'm going to do the same for the getMember as well. List.getHTTPOptions. Okay, so now that's our service created. The next thing we'll take a look at is getting our list of members, and we'll take a look at that next.